you ready?
Welcome into our Trotter Road Hospitality Studios here at the Hampton Inn in Oxford by the Conference Center. This is Hotty Toddy Hotline. We are back on our TV broadcast of Hotty Toddy Hotline as I am back in Oxford. I'm Browning Stubbs, your host on this show, and we are going to talk some Ole Miss basketball. The Ole Miss Rebels went 0-2 this week, and we'll talk about why they went 0-2. Obvious reasons, injuries killed the Rebels this past week, but it's not just Ole Miss basketball that's making headlines in Oxford and around the country, but Ole Miss football, the recruiting, it's coming down to the wire here for Ole Miss football. About just a week and a half to go until National Signing Day. We're going to talk to Breck Jones of RebelWatch, and he does a podcast in Oxford. He's going to tell us about recruiting, and he'll touch on some basketball as well. Our friend Matt Ensel got a big win this week for the Lady Rebs, and we're going to talk what's going on. Ole Miss track, they've gotten started. Ole Miss baseball, they are around the corner as well. So great to be back on the TV version of this broadcast, but we're also on radio as well. So make sure you turn your TV up, turn up the radio, and we'll get Hotty Toddy Hotline going. Big basketball week, a lot of football recruiting. We'll be right back.
Because you want more flavor, at Nuke's we marinate and grill to perfection. Because you want the latest culinary tastes and trends, we never rest. At Nuke's, great food drives us. So we are meticulous in our preparation, obsessed with the quality of our ingredients, and uncompromising about serving you our very best. We believe that sharing a memorable meal is one of life's ultimate pleasures. Join us at Nuke's Eatery.
Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. I'm Browning Stubbs, and on this week's show, we're going to start out talking about Ole Miss basketball. The Ole Miss Rebels, a lot of hype about this team. Started 2-0 at the Pavilion, won nail-biters against Alabama and Georgia. So, there seemed to be a lot of hype about this team. They were 12-3, 2-1 in the conference. They were getting a lot of attention nationally about being an NCAA tournament team. And, they already played Kentucky, which most teams would circle as a for sure loss before the season. So, you go, hey, we already got that one out of the way. Let's just try to see if we can be one of the top 3-4 teams in this conference. Well, they had a lot of opportunities against teams that, were on their similar level from last year. Teams like LSU, Florida, lost those games. But then last week, we found out the news that Sebastian Saiz of Ole Miss, the starting power forward, a guy who's been a double-digit scorer, also a double-digit rebounder. We found out that he's going to miss a couple weeks because of an eye injury, and also Martavius Newby also had an eye injury. Just kind of ironic they had the same injuries. So they both missed the South Carolina game that was last Tuesday. So in that game, Ole Miss, I don't think a lot of people expected them to really compete as much in that game. South Carolina team, very good defensively. They were able to really keep all their opponents that they played in check all season. They were 16-1 going into this game, but Ole Miss, they said, you know what, we're going to have guys step up, and that's what happened. We saw a starting lineup of Stephon Moody, Rasheed Brooks, Tomas Giello, Anthony Perez, and the new starter, Marcanvas Hyman, who, of course, stepped in for Saiz. And you know what? It was an interesting first half. Ole Miss wanted it more. They were the hungry team. Outscored South Carolina 39-29 in that half. And you had guys stepping up. Terrence Davis off the bench, 7 points. DeDonte Fitzpatrick Dorsey off the bench, 6 points. So Ole Miss, they played a lot of guys a lot of minutes. Hyman, for example, led the team in minutes with 42. But second half, again, Ole Miss, they seemed like the team to beat as they were doing really well. They even had a lead with about 5 minutes left in this basketball game. It was Ole Miss was leading by 11, 64-53. So, you know what? You think, we got this in the bag, but Stephon Moody pulls a hamstring. And that really would be the story about the rest of this game. Moody was not himself, lacked athleticism, lacked his scoring ability, and it was almost like Ole Miss was playing 4-on-5 for the last 5 minutes in this game. Moody came out, tried to come back in. It still wasn't the same. So, South Carolina, they went on a 13-2 run to close the second half, and that would it was just really, really disappointing that South Carolina just Ole Miss, they didn't even score a basket in the last 4:13 as South Carolina went on an 11-0 run at that point. Just really disappointing. Ole Miss was playing shorthanded, and not only was Moody out, but you had Tomas Giello foul out in the second half, and then Anthony Perez in just the last couple minutes of the fourth quarter or the second half, he fouled out. So you're down 4 starters. Then your 5th starter, Rasheed Brooks, had his worst game as a Rebel. Shot 0 for 10, 0 for 8 from three-point land, and in the final possessions of overtime, Ole Miss really wasn't running any set plays, but they did go to Brooks to try to get a basket, and the score was 72-70. A minute 9 left. Brooks missed a 3. Ole Miss would tie the game with 51 seconds left, but South Carolina, went up by 2 or 3, and then Brooks had a chance to tie it. He missed it, so Ole Miss, disappointing game, lost 77-74 against number 24 South Carolina, a team you needed to beat. They were top 25 RPI. Ole Miss not doing well in the RPI this year, ranking in anywhere from 75 to 80. That's from what I've seen. So really disappointing loss. Down. If you think about it, by the time the game ended, you were down 4 starters, and then down a 5th starter. Really, with Rasheed Brooks, how he just was awful in this game. So you're relying on freshmen with Marcanvas Hyman, Dante Fitzpatrick Dorsey. Not going to win any games when you're dealing with that. Then the Rebels, they went on the road this past weekend, and they took on their rival Mississippi State. And we all know the history with them over the past 8 months or so with Malik Newman, the 5-star recruit out of Jackson, Mississippi. Malik elected to sign with Mississippi State over teams like Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss. It seemed like his last two teams were Ole Miss and State, but Ben Howland, the new Bulldogs coach, was ultimately the deciding factor in recruiting Malik Newman. And I kind of questioned the fit from the start because State, Coach Howland, had guys like Russell Westbrook, Drew Holiday, guys who really underperformed in college who have thrived at the NBA level. But, you'd ask Malik Newman, why would you want to go to Ben Howland at Mississippi State when, there's a track record of point guards not doing well in college there? Well, he did it anyways, stayed home. And now they played a basketball game last Saturday, and Ole Miss, they played, again, they fought really hard in the first half. They were leading 38-36 at halftime, and again, Ole Miss, the hamstring injury to Stephon Moody made him sit out this game. So, you were already down another starter there. So, Ole Miss, their usual starting 5 was Martavius Newby, Sebastian Saiz, Tomas Giello, Rasheed Brooks, and Stephon Moody. But then, the starters in this game were Giello, Brooks, Anthony Perez, Marcanvas Hyman, and Dante Fitzpatrick Dorsey. They fought really hard, and Mississippi State in the second half, they really came alive. And Malik Newman, he played his A game. He wanted to beat his rival. He wanted to really show Ole Miss that he made the right decision by going to State. And it was a really tough basketball game in the second half, but as Ole Miss ended up they extended their lead to, it was 46 to 39 at one point with about 15 minutes left in the game. So you thought Ole Miss would maybe steal one on the road, but no. Mississippi State, they closed the game out on a big run, winning it 83 to 77. But you saw, you got a lot of optimism. Even Ross Buick, the athletic director of Ole Miss, tweeted, really proud of the effort in our guys. Sam Finley, who we haven't seen him in a while, off the bench, scores 10 points. Rasheed Brooks scores 20 points. Dante Fitzpatrick-Dorsey scores 16. Anthony Perez scored 14 in that one. And then Hyman almost got a double-double, 8 points, 10 rebounds. So you really, you had a hard-fought effort in that game. But you know what? I understand Moody didn't play, but you lost to a bad basketball team. Mississippi State, 8-10, 1-5 in the SEC. Got 25 points from Malik Newman, Craig Sword, and it got 10 points. But they're one of the bottom teams in the SEC, and that's a bad loss. Anyway, Ole Miss will move on. They are on a 4-game losing streak, and they got 2 big games coming up this week. Wednesday against Bruce Pearl and the Auburn Tigers, who beat Kentucky just a week ago, and then they'll have a road game next Saturday at Kansas State. So Ole Miss, it's do or die time for them. Auburn, that's a team they're going to be favored against. At Kansas State, that's going to be a tough one. At Missouri, they'll for sure be favored in that one. But tough times for Ole Miss basketball. Got to get everyone healthy. We're going to talk more about Ole Miss basketball with Breck Jones, and we'll talk some Ole Miss football recruiting with him on the other side. We'll be right back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're now joined on the phone by RebelWatch reporter Breck Jones and co-host of Rebellious Souls podcast and Ole Miss Sports podcast, Breck Jones. Breck, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you doing, Brownie?
Doing good. I'm doing a little bit better than the Ole Miss basketball team on that 4-game losing streak, but I am hanging in there.
There's no doubt about that. You got to get healthy.
You're right. But, Breck, before we dive into all that, you do great things over with Newswatch and RebelWatch, but I want to ask you about your podcast, Rebellious Souls. What's the origin behind that with you and Colin Brister? And you guys seem to do a pretty fun show over there.
Oh, we try to. We had a journalism class together and found out he was really into sports. I was really into sports, and I don't really remember how it came about, but we were just like, yeah, we should try that out sometime. And we tried it and we liked it, so we've kept it going here for a while. But it's fun.
Rebellious Souls, that's available on iTunes, and Breck Jones at Breck M. Jones on Twitter tweets it out. All right, Breck, you were there last week against South Carolina. I was with you. We reported on it after the game. Let's talk about that. We knew going into that game you'd be without Newbie and Saiz, but then you're up 11 points with 4.5 minutes left. But then Moody pulls his hamstring, and things went downhill for there. And you weren't just down Saiz, Newbie, and Moody, but you were down Giello and Perez, who fouled out, and then Rasheed Brooks, who had his worst game of his career. Just kind of talk about the tragedy that happened at the Pavilion last week.
You kind of covered it, but going into the day, Kennedy said that he thought that Saiz was going to play. I think. Well, not Saiz, Newbie. He thought Newbie was going to play. And then, they were going through warm-ups, and, of course, the eye has swollen up on him some. You saw that today during the Mississippi State game. They showed Newbie, and his eye was very much swollen. But you go in, and you're thinking, all right, well, we know we're down these 2 guys that are really good rebounders. You're like, well, we're just going to have to go guard and shoot a lot and go out and hope that Moody knocks down some shots. But, once Moody got the hamstring problem, then it just went downhill. And you really needed Brooks to step up with the absence of Newby and Saiz, who's Saiz's second leading scorer on the team, I guess. But he just had his worst game, and, that it's tough to come back from that. And then you have two big guys who Perez had stepped up and had a pretty good game, and then Giello. And those are your two bigs right there. They're the tallest guys left on the team now that when Saiz wasn't there. And once they fouled out, then they were already getting beat pretty bad on the boards, but there was just no hope after that.
And Breck, you're right. That carried into last Saturday's game against Mississippi State. Ole Miss didn't have Stephon Moody in that one, and of course no Saiz or Newby either. But they had a hard-fought effort, and I thought it was really encouraging to see guys like Dante Fitzpatrick Dorsey, and you had Marcavis Hyman played solid as well, and it's great that those guys stepped up. But then again, you lost to a really bad basketball team.
I don't know that they're really as bad as the record shows. They had a tough game. They played at Florida. They've played some tough games so far, and I don't think they're that bad. I think they're just really young, and kind of like some of what Kentucky's going through with some of those guys. It's just taken a little while because their two best players are freshmen, and Newman and Witherspoon. And I think it's just taken a while for them to really step up. Newman stepped up and had his best game of the year. And that's obviously of his college career. And I think that they were a little deeper and a little more talented than Ole Miss today without Moody and Saiz out there. And I think that it would have been a different game had Moody been on the floor.
Sure, yeah. Ole Miss, they did have a 6-point lead early in the second half. Maybe Moody could have carried them to a win. But you know what? I was talking about it in the opening segment on Hotty Toddy Hotline Breck about Malik Newman. And, I kind of question the fit at Mississippi State because we've seen Ben Hallen coach guys like Russell Westbrook, Drew Holiday. Really didn't pan out in college. They did in the NBA. But, he kind of has a breakout game, 25 points against Ole Miss. Do you kind of see this game turning around State's season, or do you think that Newman will continue to have his freshman struggles and possibly even stay an extra year?
I think it could springboard them. I looked ahead at the rest of their schedule. I think they're gonna have a winning record from this point on. I think they'll win, 6 or 7 of their remaining games. Just looking ahead, because I really think that they're gonna springboard from this, possibly get a berth into like the NIT or something.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about Malik. He's had his struggles, but he was projected to be a first-round pick before this season. Where do you see his status right now? And if he had to make a prediction, do you think he's going to stay in Starkville next season?
I think he's going to jump. I think most people around him have said that was the whole deal. That was one of the reasons why he stayed and went to Mississippi State. His dad played for State. I think that he was going to be one and done wherever he went, and I think he preferred to stay here and stay close to home, and then jump from there. And I think that that's what he's going to do, and I think that's kind of the way Howland's treating it. I think he may be trying to protect him a little bit so far. That way you don't risk an injury or something where you point to him, hey, that's our guy. We just put him in the league. You can come here and do that too.
All right, Breck. Well, Ole Miss, they're 2-5 in SEC play, 12-7 overall. Got a interesting stretch here with Auburn at Kansas State, at Missouri. Games where you'll probably be favored in Auburn and a Missouri type game. Kansas State on the road. They kind of struggled in the Big 12. So, right now it's do or die time for Ole Miss. Assuming everyone gets back against Auburn, can this team get back on track and try to do well to squeeze into, the field of 68?
I think it's going to be tough to make it back into the NCAA tournament. I think you'll have to go on a run in the SEC tournament to make it. But I do think that this, if nothing else, this is very valuable experience for guys like Fitzpatrick Dorsey and for Marcanvis Hyman and some of the young guys like that, Terrence Davis. I just think that those are valuable minutes that are going to really come back and pay off next year when you're losing. You kind of saw the lineup of the future today, or against Mississippi State. I think that really, minus Perez, I think that, and add Saeed's back, obviously, that's going to be what the lineup looks like next year.
You know, Breck, I want to ask you about the state of the conference in basketball. I mean, we've seen teams, they've kind of made runs in the past. Arkansas had a couple great guys last year. Tennessee, the year Kwanzo Martin left, they made it to the Sweet 16. Florida was great under Billy Donovan. But now, the league, we're looking at the top. Texas A&M is 17-2, undefeated in the SEC, and then Kentucky and LSU, are fighting for second place there. But how do you see the future of this league? With all the rumors about Calipari possibly going to the NBA.
I think the league's got at a point where it's got a bunch of great coaches. I think that there's either great recruiters or great on the floor coaches all around the league right now. And it may not show right now, but I think in the future, I think it's going to improve the league a little bit. And do you think Calipari jumps to the league?
I mean, it would depend on the right situation, Breck. I mean, personally, if I was Cleveland, I would have let Tyronn Lue be the interim coach and let him coach the rest of this season. And then, depending on how he does, if he did bad and then they fell short of winning a title, then maybe you hand the keys to Calipari then. But with the Brooklyn Nets being the rumored job for Calipari, there's no future there. There's no draft picks. I don't see him taking that opportunity. Possibly the LA Lakers could offer him a job. So I do think he will eventually jump to the NBA, but it would just depend on the opportunity. What do you think about Calipari?
I think he's a great coach, and I think it's one of those things, kind of like Nick Saban in football. It's like, well, he could coach here at Kentucky for as long as he wants to, and they'll put a statue outside. But does he really have that drive to go back to the NBA and try to prove that he's just as good as anybody else at every level? And I just don't know. I mean, I'm not as informed on that as I probably should be, but I think that Calipari, I just don't see him leaving Kentucky the next couple years. Beyond that, I have no idea.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Hopefully Ole Miss will be able to recruit well in the pavilion. And Breck, we've talked about Andy Kennedy and how he's a very good basketball coach. He's been very successful at Ole Miss, but he hasn't gotten a lot of recruits because they played in the Tad Pad. That was certainly a big part of it. He's gotten a lot of transfer guys who have come in and done well, for 1 or 2 years. But now, are we at a point Ole Miss basketball where Andy Kennedy, the clock is on him, where he has either got to start recruiting because I mean, what's the excuse? I mean, he's got a brand new $96 million arena now.
Yeah, I think that Kennedy would. I don't think he'd shy away from that. Kennedy's kind of a no mess around kind of guy. He kind of gets straight to the point, and he won't make excuses. He says, he said after the South Carolina game when we were standing there in the press conference, we don't have enough SEC guys, and that's my fault. And he didn't make any bones about it. But I think that you're seeing recruiting elevate just a little bit. They got a commitment from a 4-star guy not too long ago. You're starting to get guys to at least come visit now. And I think that he knows that, all right, well, we got the building now. There's not an excuse. We got to go ahead and we just got to do it.
Yeah, that's how I see it too. I mean, I would give him, 3-4 more years tops, and hopefully he will bring in talent. But I mean, because honestly, I love Ole Miss, how they they had the year with Marshall Henderson, and then they had the year with Stephon Moody last year. But I just don't know if you can be a continuously winning program bringing in transfer guys to be your best players. I just don't see the formula for winning there.
Yeah, because if you miss on one guy that way, then it can all blow up in your face really quickly. It's a risky business and a risky game to play, and sometimes it's worth the gamble in guys like Moody and Henderson, but you can't sustain a program that way.
Yeah, and, they're almost, halfway or so through conference play, 2-5. I mean, obviously the Kansas State game, that is a must-win. But, if you really dissect the schedule, they really have a lot of winnable games, some tough road games, though. But, I mean, outside of having everyone healthy, I mean, is there anything you think that would need to change? I mean, how do you think things are going with Moody at the point guard? Is there anything that you would like to see this team change that could lead them to more wins?
I think you got to work on developing more depth, and that's easy to say and hard to do. But Sam Finley came in and actually performed and gave a little production at the 1 and the 2 against Mississippi State. And you saw some things from Fitzpatrick Dorsey where you think, well, they were only rotating, 7 or 8 guys when they were healthy anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe you could increase that to 8 or 9 or so. And you see things like that. Terrence Davis is a super athletic guy. He's young, he makes bad mistakes, but he's athletic, he's a good defender. He'll slash real well, but you just got to try to rotate more guys in like that. And I think things are going well with Moody at the point. I think if Moody's there, the offense just flows better. And you saw things where it's just they didn't seem like they're on the same page today because it wasn't Moody running the point. But when things break down, that's kind of like Moody's kind of like Manziel. I think that's the best comparison is when things break down around, Moody can just step back and make a shot. And I think that they really miss that right now, even though I thought that this was actually a pretty good coaching job by Kennedy against Mississippi State and against South Carolina.
Yeah, he was very competitive in both of those games. All right, Breck, well, that wraps up our basketball discussion. We're going to take a break here on Hotty Toddy Hotline, but when we come back, Breck's going to stay on the phone and talk some football recruiting. We'll be right back.
Hey, Rebels, your truck is here. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford presents the all-new Ram Rebel. It's Ram, the Rebel way. Send an unmistakable signal. Rebel 24/7. Ram Rebel from your friend in the car business. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford.
Come by, let's be friends.
Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. We are on the phone with Breck Jones. Follow him on Twitter at Breck M. Jones. All right, Breck, let's switch gears. Let's go from the hardwood to the gridiron. We're talking football, recruiting for Ole Miss. We've not had you on Hotty Toddy Hotline, but I do like to ask everyone's opinion on the past season. I mean, I was listening to your podcast for Rebellious Souls, and you said, Ole Miss, they're past the point where, you shouldn't be bragging about, Ole Miss 43 national champs 37. But I did hear you guys talk about there was no excuse to lose to Arkansas. Florida, you know what, they had a PED quarterback, and they got their butt kicked all 60 minutes in that one. But in my opinion, I've shared this about every week on the show. I've said that it wasn't a disappointing season, but I feel like they did underachieve a little bit because when you beat Alabama on the road, you got to capitalize on that. And unfortunately, things went wrong against Memphis and couldn't stop Arkansas there. I mean, what's your opinion on how the season ended? I mean, if you would have told me before the season, would you have taken a Sugar Bowl victory, I would have said yes. But at the same time, there could have been so much more.
It could. I think that's kind of a caveat with the season. Alabama's been the gold standard since Nick Saban got there, and he's raised the bar at such a level where you think, okay, well, if you beat Bama there, you got to do it. I mean, LSU beat Alabama there in 2011 when they went on in the rematch and Alabama won the national title. And they won the West that year. That was the last time I think Bama didn't win the West, right?
Yes.
Then it's tough to say, hey, you got no shot after that. Like after you go and you lose to Florida, who, I think that would have been a more competitive game other days. I think that was just one of those days where nothing went right just from the start. And, they had Greer, who obviously didn't play anymore after that game. It's just, I think it was overall, I think it was a successful season. I think if you're told, well, this is the season you're going to have, and you're going to beat your two biggest rivals in LSU and Mississippi State, and you're going to beat Bama and Auburn, I think that you'll take that every time. But just knowing what could have been, if it wasn't for that Arkansas game, or even if you'd taken away two of those losses that you're in the playoff, then it kind of tones down otherwise what would be just a tremendous season. And maybe if you get beat by Arkansas where it wasn't like that, if you just got beat kind of like you did in the Florida game, then you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Then it just wasn't meant to be this year. But, just losing the way that they did is the hard part.
So now we turn our attention to recruiting, where Ole Miss, Breck, they've been buzz. They've had quite the buzz around the country with, two guys in Gregory Little and Shea Patterson. Those guys seem to be the anchors of this recruiting class. Of course, Patterson already enrolled in classes for this semester. But I do want to ask you about Shea. With Chad Kelly staying this for a senior season, do you see a situation where Ole Miss would redshirt Shea Patterson, or do you think Shea, might just want to be the backup quarterback and try to learn as much as he can from Kelly?
I think redshirting Shea would be kind of pointless. I honestly believe that in his mind, he's going pro in 3 years anyway. So I think that would be kind of pointless. And I think you could get him some experience in some of the games that you think he'll win pretty handedly. And also, you never know. I mean, he's a very good runner. Kelly's a great runner, but maybe you have a package here and there for Shea to run that he provides something a little different. But I think it'd be better for him to be out there on the field with Kelly, seeing how to go about things a little more than you would if you were redshirting, and be more involved. I think that he'll be the backup next year. I don't think you'll see him get redshirted.
Yeah, that's one of the big questions that I've had for a lot of analysts like yourself, because I just I just thought, maybe if they redshirted him, then that would lead him to another year here. But you said it yourself. I mean, he's got his eyes set on only being here 3 years. So what? I mean, what you said. I mean, I guess that seems like a fair idea. Where he would play in some blowouts, and then he would maybe have a package.
I just think that that's the way to go, because, I mean, his Twitter header picture in there for a while was Radio City Hall or wherever they have the draft in New York. And that's the way a lot of kids' minds are now. You don't see many 4 or 5 stars come in and get redshirted anymore. It's just kind of a different era in college football. Everybody coming out thinks that they're the next whoever. They think they're the best.
Breck, there's a lot of guys at Ole Miss is still targeting. Jeffrey Simmons of Knoxville County, of course, was a big factor in beating the Lafayette Commodores this past year in the playoffs. But who are some guys that are right on the line about possibly coming to Ole Miss?
Yeah, I think Ole Miss is on the edge of possibly signing a great class there, and they're ranked like 2nd or 3rd in the country right now. And Jeffrey Simmons, I also did some work this past fall as a sideline reporter for the High School Football Network, and we covered a couple Knoxville County games. And Simmons just looks different when he's out there. He doesn't look like a high school kid. He's out there. He looks like a man. He's big, and he's kind of in the same way you look at Robert Condici out there. That's kind of the way he is, and that's kind of the way they used him. He can go inside, outside. They lined him up at fullback in some short yardage situations, and I'm like, how's this guy not a 5-star? Just watch him. He completely dominated the game. But he finally got that 5th star, and I think he's going to come to Ole Miss. I think most signs have indicated that he's going to visit Alabama this weekend, and if he doesn't come out committed to Alabama there, then Ole Miss should feel pretty good about it.
You know, there are some guys that are that have committed, but aren't signed. Is there anyone that you think Ole Miss could be in danger of possibly losing come February 3rd?
I've heard a few rumors. I think most people that are committed are pretty solid. You had probably 6 or 7 or 8 early enrollees, and I think I've heard some things about Octavius Cooley, the tight end from here in Mississippi. He might flip there at the end. Devon Penniman, who's a running back, 4-star out of Texas. He's getting some late interest here from Alabama and Texas A&M. But, he might flip. But I think overall the class is pretty secure, the guys that are committed. This whole group nationally, there haven't been a whole lot of, flips so far. I know there's still a couple weeks left, but there haven't been a whole lot of kids that'll be like, hey, I commit here, and then 2 weeks later, I'm committed over here. It's just different. They seem either, I don't know if it's more mature or they don't know. I mean, it's just different this year.
Yeah, and this is a huge step from last year where you thought you were going to have a better class, possibly have some guys like C.C. Jefferson, but those did not work out all the way. But coming national signing, are you of the opinion that this class on paper will be better than the 2013 one?
I think so. I think it'll be deeper too. You look at the 13 class, there aren't that many guys that are actually contributing. You had obviously the 5-star guys are contributing majorly. And then you had Evan Ingram. And you had a few other guys, but you had a lot of transfers, a lot of guys that never played, a lot of guys that didn't qualify academically. That class was not as deep and as big as some people thought it was. There were a lot of just kind of, I don't want to call anybody out, but there was some bust in there, just some misevaluations. But I think that this class will be better. I think it'll be ranked higher too. I think it could end up the highest ranking I think was 5th or something for that 13 class. I think they can finish inside the top 5 with this class this year.
Breck, great stuff from you as always, and we want to thank you for coming on Hotty Toddy Hotline this week. We talk basketball and Ole Miss football recruiting with you, and we want to wish you luck, and we'll talk to you down the road, buddy.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, follow Breck Jones on Twitter at Breck M. Jones. All right, coming up, we're going to wrap up this week's show on Hotty Toddy Hotline, and we'll tell you what's coming up this week. We'll be right back.
Because you want more flavor, at Nuke's we marinate and grill to perfection. Because you want the latest culinary tastes and trends, we never rest. At Nuke's, great food drives us. So we are meticulous in our preparation, obsessed with the quality of our ingredients, and uncompromising about serving you our very best. We believe that sharing a memorable meal is one of life's ultimate pleasures. Join us at Nuke's Eatery.
Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. I want to thank Breck Jones for coming on the show, talking Ole Miss basketball and football recruiting. But we are at the beautiful Hampton Inn by the Conference Center. As you see behind me, we're in the lobby. A lot of comfortable chairs and tables for you to come do your work or just relax and have a nice continental breakfast. Book a room here. 103 Ed Perry Boulevard. Phone number 662-234-5565. And then, of course, the Town Place Suites in Oxford. That's another great place. One of the newer Charter Road hospitality locations. Call them 662-238-3522. And then, of course, over on Jackson Avenue, we have another Hampton Inn that you guys can check out. the Hampton Inn West 110 Heritage Drive. Oxford, call them 662-232-2442. And then, of course, the final property is the Holiday Inn Express at 112 Heritage Drive. Call them 662-236-2500. Well, one of our fans of the show, Matt Insel, got a big win this past week as he's beaten his rival Kentucky. You know, of course, Matt used to coach for the Kentucky Wildcats, but he beat them last year, beat his coach, his former coach, Matthew Mitchell, and the Rebels got a big win this past week, beating Kentucky. You know, they had a really bad loss to Mississippi State, but we won't talk much about that one. They lost that one 79-51, but they did beat the number 9 Kentucky Wildcats for Matt's first victory at the Pavilion, and the Rebels were led by junior Shaquila Joseph, who had 21 points, tied a career high, and then Queen Hayes and Cendrika Sessom both scored 14 points to lead the Rebels to a victory. It was a nail-biter. Ole Miss was 54-47 going into the fourth quarter, but Ole Miss scored the first 5 points of the quarter, which had Kentucky down double digits, but Ole Miss was able to pull away from that victory, and it was the first win for Ole Miss over a top 10 team since defeating number 8 Georgia back in 2010. And it was a big one, a team desperate for a win, the Ole Miss women's basketball team. So they're 10-9, 2-4 in conference play. You're kind of still trying to work your way up the ladder because you got to go at number 2 in the country, South Carolina, on Thursday. That one's at 6 p.m. And then you got another tough top 25 game against Missouri, which will be this coming Sunday in Oxford, January 31st at 4 p.m. So that's what's going on for the Ole Miss women's basketball team. Of course, the standout for them has been Cendrika Sessom, as she leads the team in scoring at 16 points per game. Oxford native Erica Sisk, second at 10 points per game. Some other headlines in Ole Miss sports. The Ole Miss Rebel Netters, the tennis team, they fell on the road to number 15 Texas Tech in the ITA kickoff. That one they lost in 4 sets, unfortunately. But the Ole Miss tennis team, they are back in action. Coming up, I'm checking out the schedule here. They are back this week as they take on Florida. That one will be on Monday of this week, and they will try to continue their play in the ITA kickoff. Ole Miss baseball, we are getting around the corner for some baseball as the Rebels, Brady Bramlett, got to speak at the NCAA convention. It was really great that Ole Miss had a representative there for the NCAA. But overall, we got a big-time basketball games coming up this week for the Rebels, and recruiting is going to be huge as well, as we are just a week and a half away from a National Signing Day. So, all right, well, that wraps up this week on Hotty Toddy Island. I want to thank Breck Jones, and you have been listening to the show. I want to thank our executive producer, John Rupp. This has been a production of CRM Sports on the Colonel Reb Radio Network. We'll see you guys next week.